You're listening to the Chorus One podcast, a show that covers decentralized networks and their impact on the evolution of automated and borderless economies. On this podcast, we invite pioneers and builders to discuss the decentralized protocols and projects they are working on.
Hi, and welcome to the Chorus One podcast. Today I'm hosting Federico, Kunze, Küllmer with Zave. Federico is the founder of Evmos, EVM-compatible network in the Cosmos. Hi, Fede, and welcome to the show.
Hey, how's it going, Felix and Xavier? Really excited to be here and answer any questions you might have about Evmos and the future of EVM interoperability.
Yeah, so Fede, thanks so much for coming on the show today. Of course, you're one of the legends within the Cosmos, so it's great to have your time and really exciting now to see, Evmos, for those who are listening who might not be aware, it's a network that's just recently launched in the Cosmos after some complex implementation that Fede and his team has been working on to get this right within the Cosmos. So I guess a great place to start here might be, so we have a lot of other EVM compatible networks, but of course they're not within the Cosmos. So how is your Evmos EVM compatible network different to a typical type of fork of the EVM, for example?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Like you've probably seen so far, many EVM compatible chains in other L1s. So to your question, what makes Evmos different than any other of them? And the answer is not only that we are EVM compatible, which is something that everyone shares, but we also implement native interoperability. So in these other networks, like the smart contracts and the decentralized applications are usually constrained only to the runtime of the EVM. With Evmos, you can have all these same applications with the same developer experience, but now they're not constrained anymore. Now you can interact with all these different applications. So if, for example, you're like Aave, and the EVM makes it super easy for you to deploy on all these different EVM compatible chains. But the major limitation is that you need to actively manage every single integration and deployment of all these different chains. So our value proposition is instead of going through a multi-chain strategy with all these integrations, is just deploy once on Evmos and be able to interact with all the chains in the ecosystem through native interoperability and also bridges that interact with other EVM compatible chains in the ecosystem. And that's from one side. The EVM powered with interoperability is able to create mass adoption as well and new use cases that involve interoperability. And for the other side, we believe that Evmos creates economic alignment between all the users. So as opposed to Ethereum and any other EVM chain you've seen in the ecosystem, we create economic alignment between all the users. On Ethereum, you find that only the miners or the block producers are incentivized through transaction fees and block rewards. And in our case, we decided when we were designing our token model to incentivize as well end users, and also developers. So that in a way, we are creating this ecosystem growth that in the long term is able to create all this alignment and all this value for all these different users. And I can go deep into each of one of these topics, but just wanted to give you a high-level overview of the value proposition. So the interoperability, economic alignment, and also scalability because of these interchain strategy instead of opposed to this multi-chain strategy that you need to actively manage every single integration.
Awesome. Thanks. Yeah, we have a bunch of questions that will go into the topics one by one. Maybe before we get there, I guess we can talk a little bit about you. You've been part of the Cosmos ecosystem for a while. I've been worked on the Cosmos Hub and different IBC things over the years. And maybe a question could be, how did you get there? What inspired you to, in the end, create Evmos?
Yeah, so my team and I have been working in the Cosmos ecosystem for years now. I started working as a core engineer on Cosmos in late 2017, working first on the precursor of Gravity Bridge that was called Peggy. And then I started working on the Cosmos SDK and IBC and other networks in the ecosystem. And so if we go back to the history of Evmos and the initial work that you already there probably Felix, you're already familiar with, is like Ethermint. There was like this initial idea of creating a fast finality EVM that run on proof of stake. This was the core value proposition that wasn't possible before, and this was again back in October 2016 when this project started. But unfortunately, because of some limitations in terms of human resources, the team that was behind this effort had to reallocate all these engineers to work in the Cosmos Hub and the Cosmos SDK. So there were basically the project was passed through multiple teams without any clear handoff or clear timelines. I had been working in Cosmos for a long time, waiting for this project to launch, and I had the opportunity to work as a contractor for one of these companies that was maintaining this project or trying to not let it stale. What they underestimated was in order to get a project like this off the ground, not only you need to do all the engineering work, make sure that everything works, but you also need to work a lot in terms of integrations on the business development side. This is what a lot of people underestimate. Sometimes they fork the chain and I have a new chain, but they don't have any basic integration, any basic infrastructure. They don't have the oracles. They don't have the indexers. They don't have the block explorers, the multi-sig providers. So there's nothing for the new applications to just jump on and have these manual Legos. And this is the main reason why we decided to, I decided, and together with Akash, Nick, and Liam, decided to basically start Evmos as the new vision for these EVM compatible chain on Cosmos that, besides the fast finality and the proof of stake model, had also the native interoperability and the economic alignment and all these value proposition items that I mentioned before. So just expanding the scope of the original project, and we maintained the name of just the EVM module as Ethermint that a lot of other chains in the ecosystem already integrate to their chains.
Cool. Yeah, I think that's definitely an interesting journey you've got there. I'm not sure if it's a little too early in the podcast to ask this, but I think it is quite relevant, I guess, to your network and also how you compare to Ethereum, for example. So you just mentioned the fast finality, which is something I guess an EVM developer wouldn't typically have on Ethereum. And I think this is a huge advantage of deploying on Evmos as opposed to Ethereum, for example. I guess, with Ethereum transitioning to proof of stake and then you sort of roadmap, even there, they don't have instant finality. How important do you think, why would a developer need instant finality, and how is this attractive on Evmos versus an Ethereum? Because I guess on Ethereum, they might not actually ever achieve it, whereas on Evmos, they already have that straight away. And there's, for example, for anyone listening, with fast finality, you can't reorganize the chain, which can be done on Ethereum, let's say. So why would a developer or why would anyone in Evmos have this security of fast finality, and what's the benefit of that versus say Ethereum?
Yeah, so fast finality not only unlocks all these different use cases that are useful for, supply chain or any business logic that involves instant confirmation of transactions. The major thing that it unlocks is native interoperability provided by IBC. And so with this mechanism, you can unlock true interchain composability. So remember I told you this multi-chain strategy on deploying on all these different chains and actively manage the integration. If you have instant finality on an EVM chain, you can unlock functionalities like interchain farming or managing accounts on different EVM chains provided by Gnosis Safe. So for example, Course One runs validators on the entire interchain ecosystem with interchain accounts, which is this single account that would live on Evmos. You will be able to manage all your portfolio tokens just by using a Gnosis Safe or a Fireblocks that was already integrated on Evmos. And so this interoperability unlocks basically the user experience of building on these money Legos that Ethereum already provides, but scaling that into the interchain. So now, for example, if you have a smart contract deployed on another EVM compatible chain that rents security to Evmos, you can have this new EVM chain still interact with the core infrastructure, the indexers, the Oracle services, etc., that will be deployed on Evmos. So liquidity, user experience, and of course use cases like involve interchain farming. So, for example, you can create a series of sequential transactions in the form of a workflow, in a way that you specify, like, okay, I want to interact first with a smart contract on Evmos, then I want to send an IBC transaction to Osmosis, then talk to a smart contract on Juno, and finally get all these like LP tokens or like different governance tokens, whatever, back to Evmos into a DeFi contract. So you can create these sequential transactions now with the native interoperability that Fast Finality provides, and create all these different use cases that weren't possible before. Now you're not limited to just AVM. Now you can scale to the entire interchain ecosystem.
Yeah, cool. If you think about this workflow, maybe going a little bit further down there, like, is everything paid in Evmos? Like, would Evmos basically pay the gas on the different chains, or how does that work? Does the person have to have like all these tokens on their account on Evmos if they want to move between these chains, or how do you?
Yeah, so we want Evmos to become, I mean, it's already happening. You can see it right now on Map of Stones. So we are like, I think it's top 2 according with daily active usage. So yeah, Evmos is top 2 in terms of daily active usage, and also weekly active usage and monthly active usage. So like in some way, like Evmos already became this like EVM hub on Cosmos, just by the services and applications that it provides. And initially, we want the Evmos tokens to serve as like as a utility token to provide security, to like as a governance token, and also as a gas token for interacting with all these smart contracts on Evmos. And this is something that you guys are really familiar with because of all your research, especially around like interchain liquid staking and staking derivatives. So in the future, we would imagine users providing security through the Evmos tokens and still be able to use AVM or vote on governance through these liquid staking token that will be one-to-one with the Evmos token. So like we can benefit from providing security to the network, and also the interacting with all the applications that live on Evmos and in the interchain.
Cool. Yeah, that's definitely, very exciting. And I remember speaking to you recently and just having, knowing you could use like a multi-sig, for example, to, get your IBC assets into Evmos and then use that multi-sig through Gnosis is pretty like cool, let's say, because you couldn't have done that before. So yeah, that's just one use case in itself. I want to take it through, I guess, the economics a little bit just quickly now. So you had this rec drop strategy, which was very thorough, let's say. It was there was plenty of people it touched. Really interested to hear, I guess, like what was the outcome of that? Did it do the job that you intended it to do in the end? What was the strategy, and how successful was it?
Yeah, so the rec drop itself was a mechanism to get user adoption from both Ethereum and Cosmos ecosystem. So on the Ethereum side, we selected the top smart contracts based on utilization and gas utilization. So like we airdrop the tokens to the accounts that were the most active on Uniswap, E3, Aave, ENS, and many others. And for the Cosmos one, we airdrop tokens to Osmosis LPers and staking, and also like Cosmos Hub stakers and LPers. And also we had 2 additional categories for users that were wrecked in different smart contract vulnerabilities on Ethereum and other networks. And the 4th category was like core contributors of the Cosmos ecosystem, because we wanted to give back to all the teams that were building the Cosmos SDK and Tendermint core, and also Go Ethereum, that serve as the main purpose, as the main backbone for Evmos, basically, and also to reward all the users that interacted with the Ethermint initial project. And yeah, that's kind of like a high-level overview of the rec drop. And I think it served its purpose. We had a lot of issues, especially like with Kepler not working correctly or not displaying the right addresses, because Cosmos by default uses one address derivation algorithm for the keys, and Ethereum uses another one, and also uses a different coin type for the ones that are more technical. So Cosmos compatible accounts were displayed as valid on Kepler, where they were not really valid on Evmos because it's different address derivation. And with the same private key, you created a new different address that it was completely different from the one that Cosmos created. So that caused a bunch of issues on the UI side, and then I think like getting the right user experience for users to be able to claim this was also really challenging. Now you can go, and we've fortunately fixed that by integrating both Kepler and importing your address, your airdrop allocation directly to your Ethereum compatible wallet. So you can already do that. So like in a way, it took us some time to figure out the right user experience, because I think that has been the most challenging part in like merging these two ecosystems. Like, how do you merge the interoperability user experience with like interacting with a smart contract and using MetaMask and all that, and being able to use the applications that you're already familiar with as a developer?
Yeah, that's a super interesting topic, and from experience, it was definitely very interesting to kind of interact with both the wallets at the same time, more or less. Do you think, like, from this rag drop claiming, will this user experience like translate to, like, let's say, other applications that maybe wanna build on Evmos? Or do you see like people using like Cosmos addresses to kind of like go into Aave? How does that switch? Are there any learnings for people that maybe want to build something like that, or is it going to be more that Evmos really you should be using like MetaMask only, or is it going to be like a duality of these worlds as we go forward?
So the main part with, for example, supporting Kepler is that Kepler doesn't really interact with smart contracts through the JSON RPC, or allows you to connect the Ethereum ledger app to Kepler. It only supports like Cosmos related keys and like hardware wallets. So that, unfortunately, we're hands tied with that because Kepler. It's not our product. We're working with different teams that have this vision of interoperability and merging the user experience of the two ecosystems. Ourselves, we built this library for you to be able to sign transactions either using Kepler or using MetaMask. So you can benefit already from the user experience of both. For example, if you're connecting with MetaMask, you can sign the transaction with MetaMask. We also support, for example, like IVC transfers, which is something that's completely novel. I'm not sure if you guys use that on the application dashboard that we have. So you can send like all these Evmos tokens directly to Osmosis and vice versa, which is something really cool. You can sign with MetaMask or with Kepler. So we want to, and this is something that, in our opinion, makes us very different from like also any other EVM compatible chain. Is like we're vertically integrating a product with the protocol itself in order to create this interchain user experience that is going to be able to shape so much adoption. And we want to enable all these users to interact with smart contracts and send tokens to other networks in the ecosystem through IVC, and that's why we want to be like first movers in terms of user experience and adoption.
Yeah, totally. And I think just, on this topic as well, on, user experience, and you mentioned it a bit earlier, the importance of sort of business development and integration, as we've also learned at Chorus, building our own products in the past. So in Evmos, you touched upon it, slightly earlier, but it's to do with the economics again, like the incentives, let's say. So let's say I have built an EVM application on Evmos, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong here, if I deploy it on Evmos and my application has activity that's higher than other EVM applications on Evmos, for example, I receive a cut of some of the inflationary rewards. Is this like a strategy that has been working for you, and is this something that you'll continue to do in the long term, or is this like a bootstrapping mechanism, or how have you gone about using that to entice other EVM developers into Evmos?
Yeah, so our token model basically aims to provide incentive alignment with developers and users. So what you just say, so we allocated 25% of the newly minted Evmos tokens to users that interact with smart contracts that have been approved by governance. So we took the same model that exists right now on Osmosis and other AMMs, where you provide incentives for LPers. So in the same way, we took this model, which basically was the backbone of our rec drop, and we implemented natively on the protocol. So like now, every time that users interact with a smart contract that has been approved by governance, they get liquid Evmos tokens, like to incentivize the usage of these smart contracts, and that's what. Like it's a very different approach from, for example, all these like DeFi Summer or Avalanche Rush or all these like incentives that you find on other EVM-based chains, which usually are very centralized, very non-transparent. They usually allocate all these resources to product that they cherry pick. So if you are a new development team without any like track record, but you're like really passionate and you're able to ship, you don't like. You're probably not going to be eligible for these rewards because of like these centralized, non-community owned programs that try to push for liquidity. Here, opposely, you are creating like usage incentives which are community owned, and as for the and this is for the users only, and for the developers, every time that you interact with a smart contract, you're paying 50% of the transaction fee. So like that's one major paradigm shift from having all these projects request tokens or request funding to all these different EVM chains. You probably know that every time that, like, I don't know, like we've seen like Sushi deploy in other EVM chains in the ecosystem, like these teams probably allocated a shit ton of tokens to, and I'm sorry for the expression, but allocated a shit ton of like funding to these new teams in order to get them deployed. But we believe this is not a sustained way, and these payment or these like deployment doesn't really reflect on higher user adoption. This doesn't mean, and you can see it on the block, on the transactions per block, those higher TVLs program doesn't reflect really like you're getting more users, you're getting more transactions. So like a way to create this sustainable way of funding all these protocols and teams and users is through embedding these incentives directly in the protocol. So now every time that you interact with a smart contract, you're directly paying the users, the development team. So that creates liquid Evmos tokens that are directly growing proportionally to the adoption of your project. So the more users you get, the more transaction fees you get, and the more funding you get for your project. And this as well creates more incentives for you to propose these like governance owned incentives for your smart contract. See, like, oh, this project is really kicking off, like let's create user incentives to incentivize the adoption of our community for this specific smart contract. Like, and this drives more users, they get more usage rewards, and they spend more in this smart contract and pay 50% of the transaction fee. So in the end, it's really like creating a flywheel of economic incentive alignment between like developers, users, and also validators. That's why we are completely different from any of these other chains that are like paying all these projects to get them deployed.
Maybe like, just so I understand correctly, right? When you say more usage, that's measured in terms of kind of like the gas used by the transactions interacting with the program, or is there
for usage incentives, the incentives are allocated proportionally to the gas that you spend in a smart contract. So no matter, if you keep interacting with a contract and you spend more gas, you get a pro rata allocation of rewards based on the total gas that you spent.
And it has to be like governance approved in the sense that no one builds like a very gas guzzling contract or something.
Exactly. So it needs to be community community voted. Also because the allocation for these incentives, we only have like 25% of the newly minted Evmos tokens, right? And that needs to be allocated across a variety of smart contracts. So how the community decides on which smart contract or project deserves to have all these incentives, and this is done through governance. This is why we believe this is a community-owned process in allocating all these incentives.
So it works like the community chooses kind of the projects that are eligible, or also kind of how much percentage they get from this, or only
exactly
like
both.
Both. Okay, and that's kind of continuously updated in some way.
Yeah, so you define a period also. Like you can define a period of, I don't know, I want this contract to be incentivized for 6 months or for 3 months or just only a month. And you can define the amount of incentives and allocation. So it runs until that time, and then basically you need to create another proposal, or you can create a proposal before time runs out in order for you to extend the duration of the incentive.
Yeah, that's definitely utilizing Cosmos to the maximum. As we all know, the governance module of Cosmos is one of the nicest things about it, and that's definitely a super cool strategy to use to boost usage and adoption of applications on Evmos. So just speaking of applications as well on Evmos, I know of a few, but interested to hear more from you, Fede. I guess, has there been any applications deployed on Evmos that are not typically seen on other EVM compatible networks, or are there any standouts so far that have seen some more usage than others?
Yeah, definitely a lot of applications that are leveraging these token model, and especially the interoperability components. Right now we have interoperable ERC20s, so that allows your ERC20 token to be transferred out to Evmos and Cosmos Hub and others, and vice versa. You can represent, I think now there's a representation of the Gravity token in the EVM, and that was also voted through governance. So mostly these applications that are very similar to the ones that you will find on Ethereum, but they're completely different in a way that they completely leverage this user experience and the interchain user experience, and also the functionality that you can find on Evmos, especially in the sense of getting all these usage incentives and also the interoperability components. And I believe that we also need to start making a better job in selling these functionalities, because a lot of people say oh, Evmos is like EVM and Cosmos, but they don't realize all the token model and the economic incentive for their teams, because it makes financially sense for your team to only deploy on Evmos and interact with all the other applications in the ecosystem. And that's why, we're trying to shift our marketing strategy and go to market especially for these applications, in order to completely try to position ourselves as something more than just an EVM chain on Cosmos with interoperability, which is what people usually think about.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and I guess I hope our podcast can contribute to that story. So basically, right, we were already talking a little bit about this idea that Ethereum dApps should also probably think about moving maybe to Evmos directly. Do you have any specific strategy for let's say these type of dApps? Is it just about the marketing, kind of speaking to folks about the benefits of Evmos, and then I guess the incentive model, or do you have anything else in the back of your sleeve?
I'm sorry, what do you mean? Can you repeat that? Incentive model?
Yeah. Basically, getting dApps to deploy on Evmos. So it really is about I guess mostly you're saying marketing, kind of business development, speaking to the folks and kind of highlighting the benefits, which is this incentive model. Or do you have any other strategy on how to do that?
Yeah. So one big value proposition item that we're working towards is share security. So we've seen so far many applications on Ethereum that have been strongly pushing to create sovereign chains, or that have been in discussion, for example, like Uniswap. I think Yuga Labs also trying to discuss about creating like their own sovereign chain that is EVM compatible, so that they can run like and maintain their marketplace and NFTs. And of course, Aragon chain that wanted to use Etherman back in the days, and Compound chain. So like all of these have been efforts to migrate to their own EVM-based chain or like their own sovereign chains. But the main problem is that there's a really high complexity level for all these teams because they are EVM experts, they're smart contract experts, but they don't know about the technicalities of the Cosmos SDK, of Tendermint, and also they don't have the basic integrations. They don't have these money Legos, right, to get the ecosystem started. So like, how do we allow them? How do we align ourselves with the core value proposition of Cosmos of creating sovereign applications that are able to interoperate with each other, that have their own communities and their own governance, etc. So Evmos itself is proposing a mechanism for these applications to be able to scale, but by first deploying to Evmos and then creating an exit strategy to deploy their own EVM-based chain that, as opposed to the as opposed to the go-to-market strategy that the Cosmos Hub has, we are creating tools for them to get user adoption, and we're creating all these like interoperability components so that they don't have to duplicate any business development effort in getting all these basic integrations. Like a lot, as I mentioned before, a lot of these teams that are forking the like Evmos are completely underestimating the effort that takes in terms of business development. So how do we allow these chains, these new projects spinning out their new chains to get all these basic integration going, all the indexers, oracles, multisigs, etc. And we believe that the future is by renting security with Evmos and interacting natively via IBC with the smart contracts that are deployed in Evmos. So if we are able to quickly implement native interoperability between smart contracts via IBC, these applications are going to be able to scale horizontally by deploying their own EVM-based chain and still benefit from the basic infrastructure that is going to be deployed on Evmos. So they don't have to duplicate any effort at all. So they just like scale, and this is the main flaw that, in my opinion, has the interchain like share security that the Cosmos Hub has been pushing for. Like what's your incentive, or what do you get out of like deploying a new chain, renting security from the Cosmos Hub? Like if you don't get any of the basic integrations, if you don't get any of the composability, this is why for us it's critical for these new chains to benefit from the interchain composability that we're enabling through IBC.
Yeah, that's definitely a component I hadn't really thought about, to be honest, like share security in Evmos, but I think it makes total sense. We've seen a lot of Ethereum applications like flirt with becoming their own application-specific chain, like, you know, maybe even Compound back on Polkadot or something, I think, like Substrate back in the day. So, yeah, totally. I think it's definitely a great strategy. I might want to finish off with a more technical question here, because I think for anyone listening that might not be aware, you're also like a core contributor to many of like Cosmos' great sort of more technical elements that perhaps an EVM developer wouldn't be so familiar with. So in specific, I'm talking about ABCI here, which I think, Fede, if you don't mind, maybe just explaining a bit about what ABCI is and like how Cosmos has that, and more specifically Evmos has that, and your work there, and also sort of like ABCI++, which is the next, you know, rendition of ABCI, and how that, why would a developer or, you know, EVM sort of person care about this? Because it's definitely something very unique in Cosmos that an Ethereum person might be interested to hear more about.
Yeah, so high-level overview of ABCI. So how the Cosmos stack is built, you basically have the Tendermint consensus, then you have Cosmos basic application that provides all the different modules with their corresponding business logic, and on top of that, you build your I don't know, like your chain-related modules, or like the value proposition that you're providing with the business logic that you have. So in some way, think of this as the base layer being the main core, and the way for the consensus layer to communicate with the application, with the business logic that you're providing, i.e. the proof of stake, the governance, the EVM, etc., is through these application blockchain interface, or AVCI, that natively interacts with the application, as I mentioned. And so that's kind of like the high-level overview. And the AVCI++, it's a mechanism, like it's the next iteration of this interface where the application is also able to interact with the different consensus rounds within Tendermint. So, for example, if you want to add additional logic into your block header, or you want to add additional validation, and this is all going to be enabled through AVCI++. So, for example, some use cases that we're looking for is, for example, one major challenge that we face while building Evmos and Ethermint, which is a library that powers the EVM that we maintain, is how do we ensure compatibility between like the Ethereum and the Tendermint or Cosmos types. So, for example, like on just minor things, like for example on Tendermint, you don't represent the total gas in the block header, whilst on Ethereum you have that. Also with the base fee that was introduced with the EP 1559. Also, the transaction formats are completely different. So you also have the receipt. So when you query a single transaction, the receipt for that transaction is completely different between like Cosmos and Ethereum. So maintaining the compatibility between like those different types can be done more efficiently with AVCI++. So instead of keeping stuff in the state, you can enable this functionality to be completely included in the consensus run or in the header. So you can extend the block header fields, or you can add new additional functionality to the consensus run. So for example, on Gravity Bridge, the main limitation right now of Gravity Bridge is all these attestations of events. So basically, me as a validator, I saw an event that was transferring funds from Ethereum to Cosmos. And so that is sent as a transaction. It's basically creating a consensus round on the application layer instead of the consensus layer. So if you pass in the checksum of the events and the event data to the consensus itself, you're able to reduce a lot of state so that the validators don't need to maintain and send additional transactions. It's all included in the consensus layer. So those are use cases that are going to be enabled, and there's like also cryptography improvements that are going to be enabled through AVCI++. In our case, as I mentioned before, like ensuring the compatibility between like the Cosmos and Ethereum types and adding these additional fields. And of course, for example, so like all the EVM compatible functionality that is very different, like the gas metering, etc., that is going to be hugely beneficial with this improvement. So that is AVCI++ and the functionalities that it's going to be enabling.
Awesome, thanks, Fede. We're ending here on a very technical note. I mean, I encourage everyone to look this up more. I think it's very interesting. I actually haven't understood it to that extent yet myself. I guess maybe one thing before we really wrap up from my side, like some of this basic infrastructure you mentioned, like let's say the Oracle or some other thing, could something of this also like move into this ABCI like consensus round directly? Like let's say you get like some price fee directly, or is this
exactly that's a major functionality that you can enable. Like so, for example, Oracle services directly. Imagine like in the consensus round, you can define like, oh, what's the price of. So like Terra was running on Oracle as a module. You can directly include that on a price Oracle directly in the consensus layer. So like while voting on all the transactions, you can also include the price feed directly on the consensus layer. That's something that can create a massive improvement in terms of performance.
Yeah, that's very impressive. Thanks for answering the technical question. I think it doesn't matter if it's technical or not. You just really described like the power of Cosmos, and I honestly always say this word, but it's totally to do with flexibility and just the amount of smart minds like yourselves and other people that are working on improving core logic of sort of the stack of Cosmos itself. So definitely lots to look forward to. I hope anyone listening has found this useful and they're excited about deploying their applications on Evmos. Like I know Felix and I personally are pretty big fans of Evmos as well as yourself, Fede. So it's been great to have you on the podcast today, mate. And yeah, all the best for the future.
Thank you so much. There were really interesting questions, and I hope I was able to answer. If not, you can also DM us on Twitter, or we also have like a Discord that you can chat with the core team.
Yeah, we'll link those in the show notes. Thank you, Fede.
And maybe, Fede, just for listeners to know, where on Twitter exactly can they find you?
Yeah, so on Twitter, you can DM us directly to evmos.org. The founders are usually looking at the DMs, and if you have any questions, you can talk to us directly.
Perfect. I expect a lot of questions on ABCI after this, so look forward to answering them. And yeah, cheers again, Fede, and keep in touch, mate. Thanks again.
Bye-bye.
See you, Fede.